Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fan Sports Varsity. I'm your host, Frank Langella, joined by my co-host, Marcelio Langella. Mars, we're reaching week 4. Got a couple weeks left of football before the football season comes to an end. Again, another wild week with the whole COVID. Teams are, playing multiple games in 1 week. It's just been a very unusual time, but it's another good week of football, and I'm glad for these kids to compete and watch some of these really interesting games. We're starting to get into a little bit of a more rivalry week now. As we have the season coming to an end.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of tough to schedule games as close as it is, but the most important thing is to get kids on the field and just play some football. You know, I mean, I think that's really the approach of every coach right now, just to get as many games as possible. We knew it was going to be a tough road, but just being able to play the game is already a blessing.
And they have been, they have been on the task of trying to get games and trying to make the schedule work, and they do deserve. The schools deserve credit for that. Some teams are coming back from COVID protocol, and we'll get into the games that, we'll pick about 5 of the games that we'll do the matchup on. We'll pick all the games at the end. I think actually AA is going to play all 14 teams are going to play. So that's some good news so far. Again, we make this video earlier in the week. We'll see what happens. But let's start it off, Mars. The schedule, Yonkers Force at Yonkers Brave. This big rivalry. Both teams are 0-1. That was scheduled for week 1. It got moved. They actually changed it again and had them play this week when they were supposed to be playing different teams. But we'll get into that game. John Jay's Fishkill at Suffern. RCK at Arlington, another big rivalry on Saturday. New Rochelle at Portchester on Saturday. Scarsdale at Mamaroneck, another close rivalry on Saturday. White Plains at Carmel on Saturday. And on Monday, North Rockland at Fox Lane. And Fox Lane just played a game tonight, and they went 2-3, and North Rockland was on the COVID pause. Those are the games on slate, Mars. We'll dive into about 5 of the big games, and then we'll pick all of them at the end. So let's start it up, Mars. Let's go with the Yonkers rivalry. Yonkers Force 0-1 at Yonkers Brave, also 0-1. We actually broke this game down week 1, but they ended up not playing each other. I'm glad that they were able to figure it out, Mars. But, we talked about when we first spoke about this game a couple weeks ago, each away team has won the last 2 meetings. So each road team has won. This game has been a lot of people go to this game. Obviously, Yonkers, used to pull out a lot of talented football players, right? They used to have some big programs, a lot of talented football, and they're trying to bring Yonkers football back. But let's start with Yonkers Force, Mars. Offensively, again, they mix the wing tee out of the gun stuff, but they also come out in the power eye, which we saw in their first game versus New Rochelle. 3 backs in the backfield, and they want to run Jackson downhill. He's a load. It takes more than one guy to bring him down. And up front, they have some bulk. So I'm expecting Yonkers Force to test the strength of Yonkers Brave. Yonkers Brave, they played a physical game against Portchester, but I'm expecting Yonkers Force to use its size at the running back and the offensive line spot to try to push around Yonkers Brave. Defensively, Mars, when we talk about Yonkers Force, again, you're going up against the option, so you got to be disciplined. We talked about this before. You got to win the early downs. Force Yonkers Brave into passing situations. That's not something they're comfortable with. So I'm expecting to see those 5-man fronts. I'm expecting to see these defensive linemen try to get penetration into the backfield and force these negative plays, because that's what puts the option offense back on its heels, is when those negative plays, those 2nd and 3rd and longs. That's really where you want to get Yonkers Brave. And with a quarterback that is unproven on Yonkers Brave, that's what you want. You want to put the ball in his hand in passing situations. Mars, what are your thoughts on Yonkers Force?
Yeah, I mean, offensively, like you said, they're really trying to show off their power. And this is kind of going to be the matchup that they're looking for. I mean, it's hard to run power football against New Rochelle. I mean, that's just such a difficult road to kind of go on. But I really think that they're going to try to continue with this scheme and try to run downhill, gain as much as they can. And I think that, having size up front is definitely going to help. When it comes to defensively, as you mentioned, staying disciplined, playing against an option team, you need to make sure that you follow your keys, follow who you're supposed to get on all facets. And the most important thing is win the first down, win the line of scrimmage, and force Brave to Yonkers Brave to have to throw the ball, do something that they're not really keen on doing.
Yeah. And when you go to Yonkers Brave, offensively, Marcy, it was a struggle against Portchester. They run the option. It was a struggle. There was a lot of penalties, turnovers. Obviously, it was their first game I'm expecting them to definitely improve on that, but they have to reduce the turnovers. That's what really hurt them. And obviously, the loss of Joshua Williams, Mars, is huge. Their running back and defensive back. He was the Frank's finest defensive back, probably their most explosive football player. It's a big loss. But now it's going to rely on other guys to carry the load. And one guy, keep in mind, is Needham, who had a big run against Portchester. Him and others are going to have to create some explosive plays. But the big thing is you got to play cleaner. It was just a very sloppy game week one. To beat Yonkers Forest, you're going to have to play a clean game. Don't put yourselves in that long down situation. Don't turn the ball over. Those are going to be big things, and I'm expecting Coach and this team to clean things up a little bit offensively and see if they could try to test the outside on Yonkers Forest. Because I mentioned, I think Yonkers Forest has a size advantage. So I think Brave is going to try to use their speed. Defensively, Mars, again, they're going up against Jackson, the downhill runner. They have some size up front. I'm looking at a guy like Brandon Kane. He's got to be very active for them. It's going to take a group effort to stop Jackson. He's a big boy, and I'm expecting a lot of carries from him. But the big thing, Yonkers Brave, they have to prevent the big plays because, yes, they'll run downhill, Yonkers Forest, but they'll also test the outside. They're going to run downhill to set up the outside run. So, Yonkers Brave has to be keen on that. And Yonkers Brave's got to win the turnover battle. That's, to me, every team wants to win the turnover battle, but try to force some turnovers, right? You didn't win it last week. This week, try to win it. Try to change field position. Try to make plays, game-changing plays, momentum-changing plays. And I think Yonkers Brave will have a chance to win, even though when you're down, one of your best players. So that's what I'm expecting from Yonkers Brave. Mars, what are your thoughts on them?
Yeah, I mean, for Yonkers Brave, I do like how this offense runs, but unfortunately they couldn't really see the full potential. I mean, I like the team, and when we first broke them down week one, I kind of had them, I believe I picked Yonkers Brave to win the matchup in week one, but after seeing how they came out, it kind of gets you a little nervous because they looked very rusty. And I definitely think that they're going to have a better showing this time around because, after not playing really up until that first 2 weeks, you definitely have to kind of recalibrate everything. And as you mentioned, you can't run an option offense when you have negative plays, not even just because of your play itself, but because of penalties and turnovers. It just kills drives. So when you're running the option offense, you need, I say, be efficient, no negative plays, no turnovers. You need to win a line of scrimmage and use your speed to your advantage. And from the defensive point of view, it really is going to depend on the front seven. If you win a line of scrimmage, you're really going to force Yonkers Forest to have to do something different. I mean, like they said,
want to force Forest.
Yeah, force to do something different because they're looking to run you over. And if you can show them that you're not going to get run over, they're going to have to come up with a different plan.
Yeah, and for me, the matchup, I'm looking at this Yonkers Brave offensive line that I thought struggled last week versus the Yonkers Forest D-line, which has some bulk to it. That's going to be the big matchup to me. And who dictates if Yonkers Brave can stay on the field, it's going to be because this offensive line is creating some holes offensively. Mars, let's go to another game. Big rivalry game, RCK 1-2 at Arlington, that is 1-2. These teams have played each other a bunch of times since 2004, but Arlington is 7-6. These teams are pretty, they pretty much split the series, but Arlington does have a one-game advantage, 7-6. But they did lose in 2019 in an upset victory that Ketchum had over them, 21-13. So, again, back and forth series with these two rivals. RCK last week, they beat Walter Panis for their first victory. Arlington's coming off a loss to Cornwall, and we know Cornwall is very good. So they've dropped their last two. They're trying to bounce back. But let's start with RCK, Mars. Offensively, I think this is going to be a power versus power game, size versus size. That's what RCK, they run their double wing. They're going to bring in tight ends. They're going to run some powers with their fullback Saganaro. They're going to run off tackle with Warner, with their quarterback Camacho, and I'm expecting the same thing, off tackle, counters, and then running up the gut because they want to rely on their big offensive line, right? They want to rely on those guys to move bodies with down blocks, pull blocks. I'm looking at Vanderline, DeGroat, those kind of big body kids trying to move the pile and get those grinded out yards, control the pace of the game, control the clock. And just like a prize fighter, right? Body shot, and then the big play opens up. So I'm expecting this, that's what they are. Saganario, Warner, Camacho, those are the names you're going to be hearing. Running the ball, there'll be some others too, but that's going to be the big key. And just using, the names that you're not going to hear off the loudspeakers, those big guys up front, those tight ends, trying to block, move people. And it's not going to be easy against this Arlington front, but that's what they're going to try to do. They're going to see whose strength is better. Is it RCK's line? Or is it Arlington's line? And I think that's what we're going to find out offensively. Defensively, again, I've talked about RCK a few times. Defensively, I like the way that they're aggressive, they play. But the big thing is stopping the power run. That's going to be the biggest thing for Arlington with those big tackles and Nunez and Vanderlyn. Stuff in between the guards and the centers, right? Make them run into the tackle box, the tackle area. But they need to, those defensive ends and those big D tackles got to hold these offensive linemen so that the linebackers can run around free and make plays in the backfield. That's what's going to have to be big for them, because if these big Arlington guys, push the pocket into those linebackers, into Finn, into Oliveira, it could be a long day for Arlington. And they started to do that in 2019. Can they do that again this time around? So I'm looking at guys, the linebackers, Clark, Saganaro, John Coppo had that big pick six as an outside linebacker, and I really like that guy. So they're really going to be tested, and these linebackers are going to have to be very active. I also think Arlington, because of the size, big bodies versus big bodies, I think they're going to test the outside a little more. I think Grant, they're going to have some outside runs with Grant, outside runs with Finn, try to get some quick throws on bubble screens to the outside. So I'm expecting, RCK's defense is going to have to be disciplined. They're going to have to tackle in space, prevent those big plays if they're going to have a chance. Mars, what are your thoughts on RCK?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at RCK versus Arlington, especially, just the way that both these teams are built, it's a power versus power type of schemes. And I think that this is going to be possibly one of the shortest games of the week because of the fact that they both have very similar concepts or schemes.
Styles. Formation's very different.
But their scheme of basically we're trying to run you over type of ideal. And when you look at RCK, as you mentioned, a lot of off tackle, a lot of counters, a lot of pulling, and it's really going to be dependent on how well this offense moves on their offensive line. Yeah. Can they get a push of this big Arlington front? And if they can, then the offense is definitely going to be moving around. I mean, you're coming in with double wings, double tight ends. You're really trying to show that you have some strength behind you. Yeah. When it comes to defensively, I mean, it's going to be the same thing on the other side. Now, granted, you're not going to be seeing a lot of double wings, double tight ends, but you'll see a lot of you'll see a lot of running downhill, and really it's going to depend on how well the front is ready to be aggressive and be efficient. In my opinion, you can't allow Arlington to have long drives because they'll just wear you out. You need to kind of hope that your front can hold up, especially with your linebackers, and try to get off the field as quickly as possible. Because once the Arlington starts to get the ball rolling, that means they can be on the field for a very long time, and you might have less chances on offense to get some points.
Yeah, and RCK is not a big play offense. They need the ball in their hands. So it's true, if they can't get off the field defensively, their offense, who likes to grind games out, they're not going to have a chance to put up some points. But let's go to Arlington, Mars. Offensively, the last 2 weeks they played Carmel and Cornwall. Those are two very difficult opponents. And offensively, they were having some difficulty. Right, the downhill running attack was not working. I still have faith in this offensive line. I think the offensive line will step up this week. And I think they are going to try to run downhill with Finn. And they're going to try to run downhill with Grant, who had that long touchdown run. But if it doesn't work, they're going to go into the spread looks. Right? And they're going to try to run outside. That's what I believe. And they're going to try to run the RPOs. But the problem is the RPOs, they just haven't been that smooth the last couple weeks. So I'm expecting quarterback Fortunato to bounce back to him in this pass attack. Got to rev it up a little bit. Right, because teams are starting to bail out against the run. They're pretty much playing you man coverage, forcing you to throw the ball. And they got to take advantage of it. But it's not just the quarterback, right? I'm looking at the wide receivers. You got to try to make some plays, right? If the throw's not perfect, you still got to make a play on it, right? Everyone's got to step up from the line to the quarterback to the wide receivers. And I think Arlington has the talent to do it. So I'm looking at Fortunato. He's probably going to have a bounce back game. And if they start throwing those quick throws, the Griffin, Lozito, they got to make some plays out there. Make a guy miss. Make a big play. If the ball's a little low, dive for the ball. Make a catch, right? And then they're going to try to test on those outside runs like I talked about. But I do think right in the beginning they'll test that downhill running. But if it doesn't work against a tough RCK front, expect to see some outside runs. Expect to see some quick throws and them to go into more spread looks. But they got to they got to get more consistency out of those quick pass attacks that haven't been there the last 2 weeks. But I am expecting them to bounce back this week. Defensively, Mars, again, when we talk about the double wing, a lot of off-tackle stuff, a lot of pulling, down blocks. To me, the point of attack is going to be big. So this defensive line, like Gibson, Weathers, they're going to have to anchor down on those down blocks. They can't get washed down. They can't have the point of attack pushed. Because, again, if the linebackers, you want those linebackers running free, and you want to create some penetration. So you're going to see some down blocks. You're going to get some good angles on you. Try to cause some penetration upfield. Right? Don't get washed down. Don't get blown off your spot. cause penetration, shoot the gaps, or better, and if you can't, right, hold up linemen, prevent them from getting to Finn, prevent them to getting to your linebackers. But I'm expecting to see some loaded boxes versus RCK because RCK, you're trying to prove if they can throw the ball consistently. And I'm expecting Arlington to load the box, try to stop the run the best they can, and to get them in long down situations so that we could see, and maybe those DBs can make some plays on some RCK throws and force some turnovers. Mars, what are your thoughts on Arlington?
Yeah, when you look at Arlington, as I kind of mentioned before, they are trying to run the ball downhill. I mean, playing against Carmel and Cornwall definitely is two straight difficult opponents to go up against. But I feel like now that after having those really tough opponents, they're kind of now recalculating everything and kind of going to try to bounce back. But as we mentioned before, they're going to run some I formation. They're going to run some spread. They're going to test the waters. If they can just run you over, then they won't switch the spread. I think they'll just keep running I. But as you mentioned, if the front starts to get kind of beaten up front, then they'll probably switch it to be more of a spread type of scheme to see whether or not maybe the receivers can beat your corners. And I think that's kind of the interesting thing about Arlington is that they can mix it up. Yeah. Defensively, it's going to really depend on, just like RCK, the front seven. And I think that's going to be really important for D linemen to squeeze down these holes to make the field more condensed. Make there be a lot of mess.
They got to squeeze the holes.
And make it a pile up of bodies to the point where you won't allow RCK to really have a lot of room to do a lot of stuff, and then you can try to just, like I said, squeeze down the gaps and force RCK to do something that they may not be used to doing.
Got to get them in second, third, and long, Mars. You got to get RCK throwing the ball because if they can grind out games, that's what they'll do. So you got to prevent them from doing that. For me, that matchup, Mars, when I go back to the game, I'm looking at Finn and Grant. I'm looking at these two running backs of Arlington versus the linebackers of Ketchum, which I like. Now, I don't think Ketchum doesn't have these rangy guys, but they have these guys who attack downhill. They'll hit you. And if they can keep everything in between the tackles, I think RCK will be satisfied. If they can get outside, that's where Arlington's running backs might be able to hurt them. Let's go to the next matchup, Mars. We got another rivalry. Scarsdale 2-1 at Mamaroneck, who's 1-2. Mamaroneck 6-5 versus Scarsdale since 2004. Again, two pretty evenly matched teams that have split over the years. But Mamaroneck has a one-game lead in Scarsdale. But I think it was Scarsdale, who won in 2019, 27-12. Last week, Scarsdale beat White Plains. Mamaroneck lost to New Rochelle. And let's start with Scarsdale, Mars. Offensively, to me, the biggest question is going to be the status of their starting quarterback, Ebner Borst. He's a weapon. He had a really nice touchdown at the end of the second half last week, and then he got hurt, and he never came back. So I'm interested to see the status because he's another athlete, a guy who can really hurt you running the ball. And I think he's their more natural thrower. So I think he's the better athlete, but I tell you what, they have a gritty guy to replace him. And that's Ben Miller, their fullback who played quarterback last year. He stepped in. He was rotating last week, and then he became the full guy in the second half. He had a very gritty performance, and he really carried the offense last week to the victory for them. 134 yards rushing, a rushing touchdown. He had some, I think it was like 40-something yards passing. It was a really gritty performance by Ben Miller, and he's going to have another one, especially if Ebner Borst is not playing. Because now there's going to be a greater focus on him. And, whoever replaced, I think Potters was the fullback when he moved to quarterback. It's going to put more pressure on Potters. It's going to put more pressure on Glantz, Higgins. It's going to have to become a group effort with Ben Miller at quarterback because I don't know if they're going to, he had a great performance last week running the ball at the quarterback spot. I don't know if Mamaroneck is going to let that happen again, let that happen this week where Ben Miller really takes over the game. So these other guys are going to have to make plays for them. And, Mamaroneck has been, prone to giving up big plays. So if you can get on the edge, if you can make one tackle miss, there's an opportunity for Scarsdale to hit some big plays, especially with those running backs on pitches or the option pitch. And so I'm looking at, Scarsdale, they're going up against a potent offense, a defense that has given up big plays. I'm looking for them to try to control this game, control the tempo of the game, control the clock of the game, keep Mamaroneck's offense on the sidelines. But for them to do it, the offensive line is going to have to play well. Mamaroneck has some good edge defenders who can get to the quarterback and cause negative plays with their penetration. So this offensive line is going to have to do a good job of keeping those guys at bay. Defensively, Mars, I don't know if you know this, but do you know who the number one defense is in AA?
Who?
It's Scarsdale, Mars. Scarsdale has the number one defense in AA. They give up 9.3 points a game, which is number one. Not New Rochelle, not Carmel, not John Jay. It's Scarsdale. This defense, I've been really impressed. They rally really hard. I love the way the secondary played last week against a passing team. They had some pretty darn good coverage against some of these bigger, taller receivers. And they're going to have to repeat that because Mamaroneck has some big, tall receivers as well, but a quarterback who's going to try to test this secondary. But I do think Scarsdale's one of the better red zone defense. It's not a lock you down type defense. They're a bend but don't break one. When you get near the goal line, they really hunker down. They prevent you from scoring points. Guys like Glantz at the linebacker spot, Potters at the outside linebacker spot, they've been very active. And even guys, I mentioned the secondary, Miller, Higgins, Shellen, they were really impressive. And they're going to have to play big again against a Mamaroneck team that has a really solid running back and a potent passing attack. So those are the guys that I mentioned. Glantz and Potter's got to stop the run, got to be able to tackle in space, and this secondary guy's going to have to step up like they did last week. But another guy, defensive lineman Callie, he's going to have to get some pressure on the quarterback when they go into the passing situations because Mamaroneck has also shown that they'll turn the ball over. So I'm interested to see what Scarsdale does against another potent offense. They did a really good job last week at a bend but don't break. I'm interested to see how this defense, the number one defense in AA, goes against Mamaroneck. Mars, what are your thoughts on Scarsdale?
Yeah, Scarsdale, I really like the way they've been playing so far. Specifically, mainly on the defense for sure. But when it comes to offense, granted, you losing your starting quarterback is definitely a big deal. But Ben Miller has definitely been playing playing pretty well for someone to step right back into the spot.
And he played quarterback last year.
Yeah, that's the point. He played that spot last year, but just stepping right back into it and playing as well as he is great to see. But as you mentioned, it has to do a lot with the other athletes. Running the type of offense that Scarsdale does, you need to control the pace. You can never have negative plays. You always have to get in the positive.
Yep.
But if you can keep the ball in your hands and keep the ball out of Mamaroneck's hands, I think that's going to be beneficial for your offense because you can just wear down Mamaroneck over time. And whenever it happens, when a team gets tired, they really start to lose their focus and discipline, and that's where you make a big play. So keeping the ball in your hands, keeping the pace on your side, momentum on your side, is definitely going to be beneficial for your offense. Defensively, you kind of mentioned the fact that they're number one in points allowed. They signify the bend but don't break, and I really like the way that they've been very gritty against every team so far. Yeah. When you look at how they'll play against Mamaroneck, there's really one of the two options, and both of them will rely heavily on the front. If they're going to send more guys in the secondary to stop their pass, it means that the front, how many guys they send, whether it's 4 or 5, they need to make the play. You need to get to the quarterback, force turnovers, or force some pressure at least. But if you are sending a lot of guys, you're depending on your secondary, the front still needs to get there. Right? If you're sending the heat, you need to get there fast and quick. At the end of the day, either scheme that you run, the front's got to make a big play.
And defensively, they're going to go up against another spread. They don't run the same exact plays that White Plains does, but it's going to be similar looks. You're going to see those spread looks. They're going to try to get thrown the ball. They're going to try to throw it deep on you. So, I'm interested to see if Scarsdale kind of repeats what the game plan was against White Plains versus them, Mars. But let's go to Mamaroneck. And Mamaroneck offensively has been impressive this year, even though they've had a slew of injuries, including one to their best player who's done for the year in Jack Benton. Mars, offensively, they averaged 28.3 points a game. That is third in AA. So this has a potent offense, and it starts, obviously, in my opinion, with their, the offensive line who has, I think, been improving, even though there's been injuries. They have improving, and their running back, Sandrum. Last week, Mars, against New Rochelle, 150 yards rushing. This guy is now, every week he seems to be getting better. And last week, against Scarsdale, White Plains was able to run the ball with McGuire. And I'm interested to see if Mamaroneck tries to repeat it, go into the spread looks, but run the ball with Sandrum, who has shown a really good job, balanced. He's been explosive. And I'm interested to see if they try to repeat the same kind of formula that White Plains did. But the difference is when they get near the red zone, they got to finish. Right? Scarsdale does a good job of hunkering down and making you make mistakes near the end zone. And Mamaroneck has to finish off drives. And the biggest thing that they can do is run the ball with Sandrum, run the ball with Ramsey, and then go into the play-action pass and try to test the size of your receivers versus Scarsdale's DBs. But you can't have turnovers. Again, turnovers have really been hurting Mamaroneck these last couple weeks, and if they could play a clean game, I think they could put up some points, even against the number one defense in Scarsdale, I think that they will put up points if they can just protect the football and don't force turnovers. I like Malice, but he's going to take some chances. It seems to be in his nature, right? He's going to throw those 50-50 balls, and some of them are going to go to a defense, and some of them are going to go to his receivers. He makes some great plays, and then he makes some, obviously, throws that he wants back. But if they can play a clean game, if they can run the football and then try to throw these jump balls to some of these big targets, I think Mamaroneck will have a good opportunity offensively. Defensively, Mars, again, when you're stopping the option, we've talked about the option so many times, but the big focus is going to be if Ebner Boris is not in, you got to stop Ben Miller. You got to force these other Scarsdale athletes to make plays for you. And to me, it starts on the outside with their edge guys and Verney and Fuller, who can really cause penetration, really cause issues in the backfield. And the secondary is going to have to be very aggressive in the run game. I'm looking at one of their safeties in Albert, who comes up like a missile sometimes in the run game, and I'm expecting him to be very active in this. But again, get Scarsdale into what they don't want to do, passing the ball. And they will do play action, so you got to stay disciplined in the secondary, but you got to make your reads. If your reads are blocking, you got to come up for the run. But don't just stare into the backfield, because that's how Scarsdale hurts you with the play action. And you got to prevent those big plays. That's what's been really hurting Mamaroneck. These big chunk plays they've given up on defense. They defensively, I believe Mamaroneck is the second worst. Yeah, they have give up 36 points a game. I know you're playing. You play New Rochelle and give up 50 points. That's going to be kind of tilted in the wrong direction. I don't think this defense is as bad as the numbers make it out to be, but they have to prevent giving up big plays, or Scarsdale will hurt them on the outside. Mars, what are your thoughts on Mamaroneck?
Yeah, I mean, Mamaroneck's offense has been pretty efficient up to this point. I mean, 28.3 points per game. And they're, on the opposite spectrum of Scarsdale. They're spreading you out to kind of either pass, but I could see them definitely try to run very similar to what White Plains was doing. But at the end of the day, I really think it has to do a lot with being efficient. As you mentioned, not turning the ball over, not having penalties. These are all things that you need to keep your offense on the field and keep manageable down a distance. Yes. I mean, in high school football, if it's third and long, let alone in the NFL, it's so difficult to do. In high school, it's a very extremely difficult to do. And I just think that they need to be efficient and win the line of scrimmage and be able to make Scarsdale be in a bunch of different looks. Having, as we mentioned before, from the Scarsdale's point of view, have them have to make a gamble on whether they're going to send the heat and leave your guys one-on-one against their secondary, and you just need to make the big play. Scarsdale defense doesn't really let up a lot of big plays, but you need to make your athletes make the play, put them in the right situation. Defensively, it's about stopping Miller. I think that when you look at Scarsdale, we haven't seen the next guy up that's going to make that big play, right? And up until this point, we haven't seen it, so I think that right, they have to prove that they have another guy that can do so. So stopping Miller would be the first option. Secondly, force him to be in third and long scenarios. Make them do something that they aren't comfortable in, which means passing the ball. Miller
and not play action. They can do play action. You want them to be in third and long where everyone knows they're passing.
Yeah. I think that Miller is an athlete and everything, but putting it all on Miller to now have to make a play at the quarterback spot is going to be in your favor.
Yeah, and you can get these edge guys now going after the quarterback when they get in that situation. To me, I'm looking at this matchup. I'm looking at Ben Miller and the quarterback versus these edge guys. I'm interested to see how Ben Miller attacks the edge of this defense, and he runs hard. So again, you're going to have to bring a bunch of guys to tackle Miller. Even though he's not the biggest guy, he runs like a fullback, and that's why he was playing fullback. So he's not going to be an easy guy to bring down. It's going to be important for Mamaroneck to try to stop him. So that's my matchup, Mars. Let's go to another game. White Plains 1-2 at Carmel 2-1. Carmel's 3-0 versus White Plains since 2004. They haven't played since 2015. White Plains lost to Scarsdale last week. Carmel lost to Suffern. And, we'll start at the White Plains side because, White Plains lost a heartbreak to Scarsdale. It was a back-and-forth game. They had an opportunity to win. Carmel kind of got beat up versus Suffern. But we'll start at White Plains. Offensively, again, even though they graduated a bunch of guys last year, offensively, White Plains is still good. We know they like to play fast. They average 23.3 points a game, fourth in AA Mars. The biggest issue that they had last week, they couldn't finish. Right? They had nice drives. They turned the ball over. They made some bad negative plays. They had some bad misses, and it really cost them in the game. And you got to be able to finish. You got to be consistent in the red zone, in the green zone, they like to call it, right? You got to put points up. And they didn't get a chance at that. But there are some definitely good signs that we saw, right? The quarterback Biondi, a young quarterback, he's definitely playing better. He's definitely, throwing more accurately, being more decisive. They do that dual quarterback stuff. Biondi has been improving, and you've seen that. And McGuire, you know how much I like McGuire. Mars last week, 170 total yards. He is the engine of this offense, in my opinion, because he can run the ball between the tackles and outside, and you could throw it to him. Right? He's a very versatile guy, and again, try to get the ball in his hands in different situations. And then that opens up on the outside when they have two of the pretty darn good receiver core in LaSalle, Pierre, Spista. But LaSalle and Pierre are both tall guys, fast guys, and you can run jet sweeps, especially with Pierre. You can run jet sweeps with them. I know they were motioning it to trips, throwing it into the trips. I think that was a good formula, and I think they're going to try to test that again against Carmel and test this secondary. But I think it does start with McGuire trying to run the ball either in between the tackles, mixing it up with outside runs, and then motioning get these guys into trips and getting LaSalle and Pierre either trying to overload zone coverage or try to get Pierre one-on-one or try to get LaSalle one-on-one on a backside of trips and try to make plays that way. I think that's going to be White Plains. They are potent offensively. Defensively, Mars, they have to tackle better. Last week was a real struggle. They missed a boatload of tackles. Sometimes they had guys dead to rights on 3rd and 4th down, and they just didn't make the play. Right? So they got to definitely tackle better because Carmel's got good athletes who can make people miss, and they will create big chunk plays on you. So White Plains, they really got to tackle better. Starts up front with me because I do think Carmel, offensive line-wise, I think they're going to be a little extra motivated from last week into this week. So I'm expecting Carmel to try to run at you. And to me, you got to try to stop the run because Scarsdale had success running the football. Carmel's definitely going to test that. They don't run a similar scheme at all, but they're going to try to test running downhill on you. And you got to try to stop it. That's going to be the big thing, Mars. What are your thoughts on White Plains?
Yeah, I mean, White Plains offense is a interesting show to watch. I mean, they have so many athletes on their offense. I really like the way McGuire plays, and I really like the way these outside receivers. I mean, you just have so many guys that White Plains can really hurt you with. Their big playability is through the roof, but it really has to be about being efficient, making sure you catch the ball, making sure that you are constantly attacking forward, you gain as much yards as possible, because now you're playing against a Carmel defense that has been pretty potent. Yeah. And I think that, at the end of the day, you're trying to spread Carmel out, give them a lot of different looks, a lot of different motions, force Carmel to have to practice more than ever before, right? Have to have them guessing where you're going with the ball, and I think that's going to be in White Plains' favor. But the question really is going to be about the defense. I mean, offense can score. I mean, that's not a question. It's whether or not the defense can stop the opponent from scoring more points than they do. And that's going to be the big question, specifically when it comes to stopping the run. Yeah. Carmel is a very good job at running downhill, and their backs are really are sly and smooth. They can get out of these tackles in the backfield and really make a play out of nothing. So we already saw that White Plains has difficulty tackling in the backfield. They need to be efficient in that. They need to stop them dead to rights and secure the tackle. They need the guys rally to the ball and finish the play.
Going to Carmel, and, again, it was kind of football is a humbling sport, right? Everyone, and they deserve a lot of credit. They started off 2-0, young football team. Everyone was propping Carmel up, and, again, this is what happens. You go up against opponent, maybe not just be your day. Something feels a little off. The same energy's not there, and you'll get smacked. But the good thing is I really like this Carmel team. I think they will bounce back this week, and it's starting offensively. I think this offensive line is going to come extra motivated. I think they got beat up a little bit up front last week. I'm expecting the offensive line to come a little angry, and I'm expecting Carmel to bring in tight ends, bring in the fullback, try to run downhill with power with Massey, bring in Fusco, the tight end, try to block on the edge. I think they're going to try to run downhill, and then they'll open the outside stuff. I'm expecting quarterback Dahl, who had a couple turnovers, had 2 INTs last week. Right? I think he was way under 11 for like 28, I think, passing. I think he will be more efficient. These are the type of games you'll see, these type of games from young quarterbacks. I think he will bounce back. I think they want to try to run on the edge with him a little more. Right? So run downhill and then get him on the edge, get Fiore on the edge, go into the quick passing game, and get these athletes into space and see if White Plains can tackle. Right? That's going to be the thing that Carmel wants to do. But I think it does start with the run game. Defensively, again, you're going to go up against a very different style in White Plains, right? Suffern kind of spreads you out to run the ball, even though Suffern last week kind of condensed the formula, the formations, and ran with power. I'm expecting White Plains not to do something similar. They're going to spread you out because they want to throw on you, because they want to, get McGuire into some space. So it's definitely a different style, and I think a little bit of a better matchup for Carmel's defense that likes to play with speed. They do a good job playing man coverage, but the secondary will be tested. So I'm looking at the DBs like Kay, Fiore, Maz, Rosaforte. They're going to have to match up against these receivers and this pass attack that have size, that can make big plays downfield. And then I'm also looking at this defensive line led by Telesco. They got to get pressure on the quarterback. If they're going to try to throw the ball consistently on you, you got to get to the quarterback. They like to roll out their quarterbacks as well, so you got to make sure you don't let the quarterback get outside of you. So I'm looking for this defense also to bounce back. And to me, obviously the engine is McGuire. These linebackers are going to have to be able to tackle in space, and I think they can tackle in space. It's just that, they got to attack the line of scrimmage. They got to prevent these offensive linemen to getting to the second level. And that's why I'm looking at this defensive line. I'm looking at this secondary. They're going to be two big indicators for this game. Mars, what are your thoughts on Carmel?
Yeah, I mean, Carmel had a really tough loss. I mean, they were looking like one of the most efficient teams in AA, and they look like, as I mentioned in the previous video, they look like they haven't missed a beat from being in the section title game and everything. I think when you look at that bad of a loss, I really doubt that Carmel's going to have another bad one. I think that they're going to be bouncing back, very motivated to be efficient, and I think that they're going to try to stick to what got them to the show, which is really focusing on running the ball downhill.
Yep.
But I do agree with you that they'll not only try to attack the edges, but they'll also try to get the ball to their best athletes and watch them play. Yep. And when it comes to defensively, it's going, like you said, it's going to be different from what you saw with Suffering. I mean, they're going to try to throw the ball, and your secondary is going to be tested. But the real question is going to be, can your front cause pressure?
Yep.
If you can get to the quarterback, then it allows your secondary to have some sort of a break. And they might need it because of the fact that White Plains just has so many weapons that they're going to need to really step up and have a big game.
But Carmel, I think, has some good man-to-man guys.
Yeah.
Again, Suffering doesn't really throw the ball that often, so you didn't get to see these guys. But I think these guys can play man-to-man. To me, the matchup, I'm looking at McGuire, from White Plains the last couple of weeks, has had really good games against the linebackers of Carmel, who I think will have a bounce back. They missed some tackles last week. I'm expecting Carmel linebackers to be very active in this game. That's going to be a real fun matchup to watch, McGuire versus these linebackers and Massey. Massey being one of Carmel's. Mars, let's go to the game of the week. And, before the season, I definitely had this penciled in. Obviously, COVID changed some things, but I still think this is a really fun matchup. And that's John Jay's Fishkill 2-0 at Suffern, who is 2-1. John Jay's Fishkill is 4-1 versus Suffern. Since 2004, they have won 4 straight versus Suffern. But as Suffern beat Carmel last week, John Jay's Fishkill ran into a COVID problem, and they had to go on COVID pause. They moved the game to Saturday to give John Jay's Fishkill a couple practices. They're only going to have a couple practices to get ready for this game, and they might be missing some starters. And so for me, let's start on John Jay's Fishkill, looking at offensively. It's been a little mixed offensively. Mars, they average 11.5 points a game. The big question is going to be, is Beal going to play in this game? Because Beal has been a guy who the offense has struggled for most of the game. Then it comes a big moment, he makes a big play, right? Either to one of his wide receivers or with using his legs, and that's kind of won the game, right? But if he's not there, now you're going to have a young, inexperienced quarterback in there. And what do? I think, depending on who's actually playing, because there might be more starters out, I'm not exactly sure what the COVID situation is at John Jay. But I would think you want to rely running the ball if you have your young quarterback in there. And rely on this offensive line and see if they can try to I know it's not going to be easy against this Suffern front, but you're going to have to, because you don't want to put the ball into a young, inexperienced quarterback's hands in long down situations. Right? So try to run the ball, not just between the tackles. Try to run outside. Right? You have weapons as wideouts. Use them on jet sweeps. Use them on quick throws. Again, you can use quick throws as a bit of a run attack. It doesn't have to be long bombs. Right? Get the ball out on bubble screens, right? Those can act as run plays. Those can get you those 4 yards. So I'm interested to see what John Jay's Fishkill does, because it's hard to tell when you don't know who's actually going to play, right? So how many starters are going to be playing? Is Beal playing? There's a lot of questions with John Jay. But one thing I do know is this. They're going to be well coached, right? They're going to be physical, and I'm expecting that offensively. Defensively, Mars, again, these kids play both ways, so I'm interested to see who's actually going to play. But defensively, Mars, this is the second best defense in 1AA. They give up 9.5 points a game. This is the strength of the team. So to me, if they can control the clock offensively and then defensively play the way they've been playing, they're very well sound defensively. They make it really hard to hit big plays on them. They make you earn every yard. And it's because of the linebacker play. It's because of the secondary play where they have a bunch of athletes. And up front, they had a really good game before they went on COVID pause. The defensive line was stout, led by Kohowitz. This unit, they have skill at each level. Defensive line, linebacker, and secondary. Again, I'm interested to see what who's playing. But the big thing is obviously going to be stopping Lubin. And you're going to go up against a physical front and suffer. But John Jay's Fishkill's got a physical front. So this is going to be a strength for strength if everyone's playing, or most of them are playing. And if they could just control the ball offensively and allow this defense to play the way that they've been playing, it will come down to a close game again. And then you want to see one of these John Jay's Fishkill playmakers on the edge or on the outside make a play or two that will win this game for you, Mars. I think that's John Jay's Fishkill's best chance to win this game and go to 3-0. What are your thoughts on John Jay?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that Beal is questionable is definitely going to be a big factor in how well this offense can move. But like you said, you don't want to put the pressure on your young quarterback. I mean, you want to give the quarterback a lot of those quick throws or one read throws, and that's it, right? Yeah. And then you're not trying to make them have to go through the whole progressions, especially if it's very inexperienced. And you want to try to go to the easy plays. Run downhill with your strong offensive line and your good rush offense. I mean, at the end of the day, offensively it's going to be a struggle. I guarantee you it will be a struggle. But that's the positive thing about having a good defense, right? As you mentioned, the whole game plan for John Jay would be to control the momentum of the game and defensively get off the field as fast as possible. You want to stop Cleveland Lubin from controlling the game, because when you watch what happened against Carmel, basically he was just imposing his will in that game.
With that offensive line.
And with that offensive line, and you did see a lot of suffering other playmakers make plays. But the point is that Cleveland Lubin clearly showed that he was a force to be reckoned with, and you have to limit how much Cleveland Lubin is going to be a force. Force other players to make the big plays, and limit the how easy it is for suffering to just go down the field, especially with running the ball. If you can do that, I think John Jay can do that. Their defense is top notch. I mean, they've been limiting a lot of teams from scoring. We said like 9 points per game, close around that. And if they can control the momentum, control the pace of the game, it could open up a lot of opportunities for their offense.
Now, Suffern might come out with those quarterback blasts, those power eye with Lubin at quarterback, and I'm expecting to see that as well. I expect them to mix it up, but I do think East Fishkill has a little more size than Carmel does, which may help. But Suffern might try to test the edge, and that will take the size out of the equation. Instead of running, between the tackles, they go to that power eye and run into the boundary outside. So I'm expecting them to try to do the same thing to East Fishkill, and I'm interested to see them load the box and see if East Fishkill can make the plays. But let's go to Sophomores. Offensively, we talked a little bit about it. I thought the offensive line really stood out last week. Obviously, we know Lubin imposed his will, and he was tremendous, well over 200 yards. But this offensive line really played well, and they had the best game, and they're going to have to continue that trend. Right, guys? Janua, Krebs, Newmeyer, Lee, Lockhart. They're going to have to continue that if they're going to get this monkey off their back, and that's beating East Fishkill, beating Carmel, big football program. Now you're going up against East Fishkill, another big football program. You need your fronts to win, and that's what Suffolk's going to rely on. They're going to rely on Lubin, but they got to rely on this offensive front to make plays for them. And I thought of a couple of other guys. Chow. I talked about Chow last week. He made a huge block on one of the touchdown runs. He's going to have to step up too. You're going to have to see this group effort that you saw from Suffern last week again offensively. Obviously, Lubin is he's the ringmaster. He's the guy who leads it. But these other guys are going to have to make big plays, and it starts up front for me against a big John Jay's Fishkill front. Again, not as big as they used to be, but they're strong. They're hard to move. So it's going to be a fight. And the linebackers on East Fishkill, they're very active, and they make a lot of plays. And the secondary is not afraid to come up and stop the run. So, this is not going to be easy. You want to try to get in front of the chains, because the East Fishkill secondary, if all of them are playing, they can make plays, and it's hard to pass on them. So, again, try to get in front of the chains, try to attack multiple spots, especially on the edge. I think the edge is going to be the biggest thing for Suffern to attack offensively. Defensively, I got to tell you, we know about Lubin. We know about some of these linebackers. Another guy really stood out, Dylan Yang, last week, Morris, at the defensive end. He looked like a carbon copy of Lubin on the opposite end. Him and Lubin wrecked a lot of havoc on defense. They opened things up for these linebackers to roam around and make plays. They made plays, and even the secondary. They got Carmel into down. When they got behind, Carmel had to throw the ball a lot more, and the secondary made some plays as well. So I'm expecting similar mindset. They need to win up front against this offensive line with Yang, with Lubin, get them into passing situations, and put the ball into, if Beal's playing, is going to be putting the ball in Beal into uncomfortable situations. If he's playing, you have to make sure you keep him in the pocket. Don't let him roll out. But if a young quarterback is playing and Beal is not, right? Now if you can get him in second and third and long, get him passing, get him hold on to the ball while you try to rush the passer. And that could force some turnovers. I mean, Mike Benedetto, he had a pick for Suffern last week. The secondary the last couple weeks had made, they forced some turnovers in passing situations. They're going to have to continue it against a talented wide receiver core of East Fishkill. Marsh, what are your thoughts on Suffern?
Yeah, I mean, Suffern really surprised us and with last week's big victory. And I really like the way the offensive line moved. And, I mean, we already know about Clever and Lubin, and we also did see some other athletes that come out as well. And we mentioned this in the prediction, right? Yeah. We said that this needs to be a game where the athletes, other than Klebmer, show up, and they did do that, and that's why it was such a big victory for them. But when I'm looking at the offense, and I can say the same thing on the defensive side too, the matchup is going to really be offensive line versus front seven. I mean, whoever has the advantage in this matchup is really who's going to prove to be the better team that day. And if let's just say Suffern's offensive line really can move John Jay's front seven, then their offense is cooking, right? Mm-hmm. And we saw that against Carmel, and I could say from the other side of the ball, I mean, the front seven of Suffern needs to really step up and really limit the amount of big plays that's going to happen from John G. Fishkill's rush offense, because the fact is, with Beal possibly not being able to play, John Jay's going to rely on their run, right? And if the front seven can stop that from being the main killer of their offense, then I could see this being.
What if Beal does play? What does Suffern have to do?
If Beal does play, I mean, I really still think that you have to limit the run. You have to limit Beal from making big plays. I mean, he's going to be the guy that's going to really the offense is going to be running through Beal. I think whether it's going to be running or passing, obviously, he's going to be the show on how much this offense can move around. If he does play, you have to limit the big plays from Beal, right? Keep him contained and make him have to make, obviously the front's still going to cause pressure at the end of the day. So I really think that this front seven on Suffern's going to have to step up big time.
If he doesn't play, it's probably going to be run through Whalen or Crochet, and probably some jet sweeps with Ryan and Peyton. That's probably going to be the big thing. But I agree with you about the front. To me, the player to watch is one of those front guys, Dylan Yang. He was really good against Carmel last week. I'm interested to see, is this kind of a jump point from him? Does he continue this good play? I'm going to see if there's an encore for Dylan Yang. He was really good, and I want to see him. He's going to have to play well on the opposite end of Lubin, because I would imagine he's just going to try to run away from him as much as possible, and to Yang. So we're going to see what Yang does. To me, the matchup, Mars, I'm looking at this John J. East Fishkill offensive line, and you mentioned it. This John J. East Fishkill offensive line versus the Suffern front seven. To me, if Beal doesn't play, they're going to rely heavily on those guys to push around Suffern, and that's going to be the key to this game. If they can't, if East Fishkill cannot move, then it's going to be a really low-scoring game, and it's going to put a lot of pressure on this East Fishkill defense. So that's what I'm looking for. Mars, let's go to the game picks. You ready for them?
Yeah, I'm ready to roll.
And, we've been actually picking AA pretty darn well so far this season. But let's start it off, Mars. Let's go to the Yonkers rivalry. Yonkers Force 0-1 at Yonkers Brave, who's also 0-1. I had Yonkers Brave the first time we picked this game back in week 1. I'm going to go with Yonkers Force. I'm going to change my prediction. I'm going Yonkers Force because I think Joshua Williams is a big loss for Yonkers Brave. I think Yonkers Force has a little bit of a size advantage. I think they will run downhill. And until, Yonkers Brave has to clean up offensively. I think defensively they're farther ahead. Offensively, they have a lot of things to clean up. So I'm not sure they can clean up all in 1 week. And so I'm going to go with Yonkers Force in a close one, but I'm going Yonkers Force.
I'm actually going to go Yonkers Brave. I think I'm keeping my same prediction from last time.
Actually, I think you did Yonkers Force last time.
No, you're right. I think I did. So I'm going to switch it, actually. I'm going to say Yonkers Brave because I really like the way that this team is. The problem is that they were just so inefficient when it came to penalties. And I really think that when you have a really bad game like that, I don't see it happening 2 weeks in a row. I mean, I think they'll be a lot more efficient, especially when it comes to the turnovers and the penalties, which I think will make this game a very close one. And it's almost like one of those just pick 'em games. How close it is. I'm picking Yonkers Brave.
All right, let's go to another rivalry. RCK 1-2 at Arlington, who's 1-2. Mars, I'll let you go first. Who's winning?
I'm going to go with Arlington. I think it was the past 2 weeks you're playing top-tier opponents. I mean, Carmel is looking like a top-tier opponent so far. I mean, they're I think up there in the rankings.
Yes.
And Cornwall clearly is a top-tier opponent. I think that their 1-2 record is not equating to how good this team is. And I think obviously it's going to be a battle of the big men in this game, but I think Arlington just has the advantage over what else they can do. I think having the ability to run downhill and also do spread gives them the advantage offensively, and I think I'm going to pick Arlington.
RCK, they got good size. They have a tough defense, but I agree with you. I'm going to go with Arlington. I think Arlington gets revenge off of 2019's loss to RCK. They are home. I think Arlington will do just enough. I do think this will be a close game, but I do think Arlington needs to get back on track, being more efficient throwing the ball. And I do think they will. I think they bounce back, and I think Arlington wins. All right, Morris, let's go to New Rochelle 3-0 at Port Chester, who's 1-2. I'm going to go with New Rochelle, and those who don't know, Port Chester played Yonkers Brave. There was actually a couple ejections on the Port Chester side, and they will not be eligible to play this game. Some key players for Port Chester. It's hard to beat New Rochelle with a full, complete team. Now you're going to be missing some key guys. New Rochelle has a lot of speed. We talk about it each week. Colin Jennings, one of the best players in Section 1. And then you got Gary Phillips on the outside. You got, Pereira throwing it to Gregory. These guys have a lot of weapons. They have a strong, if they can keep that passing attack efficient, once they get into the open field, they can put up major points. I don't think the 50 points against Mamaroneck was a mirage. It could be a track meet if they get in space and they have an opportunity. Mars, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm picking New Rochelle. I think whether the ejections were there or not, I think New Rochelle would have won this game. New Rochelle just has the star power. They have the efficiency, and they just have the speed. Yeah. I think they just can torch anybody that they play against. I'm picking New Rochelle.
Yeah. Let's go to Scarsdale, 2-1 at Mamaroneck, who's 1-2. Mars, I'll let you go first. Who wins this rivalry?
I'm picking Scarsdale. Scarsdale has, by points allowed, has a top-tier defense in this league. And I think that being said, they have kind of the perfect bag. You have an offense that likes to drain the clock, that wears down teams, and then you have a defense that is just a bend but don't break type of defense that really just limits the amount of points. So I really think this is actually a perfect storm on offense and defensively. And I'm not saying Mamaroneck, I think, is a very efficient team. I just think that playing against Scarsdale right now, the way that they're cooking, I just think that Scarsdale is going to win this one.
I'm actually going to go with Mamaroneck. I think Mamaroneck is going to win this. I don't think the defense is as bad as the numbers say they are. When you watch them play, you go up against New Rochelle. Once they get into the open field, that's where the big issues come. They played two very tough opponents back-to-back. I think Mamaroneck, although the slew of injuries does concern me, I do think they'll have the ability to run on Scarsdale. And I think this time around, I think that bend but don't break defense will break a little bit this week. I think Mamaroneck will put up points. Scarsdale, although they run the ball well, their offense is not that potent, right? They've come into a difficulty putting points on the board, especially when they get to the red zone. And I think Mamaroneck is going to win this game. Mars, let's go White Plains 1-2 at Carmel 2-1. Does White Plains pull off the upset, or does Carmel bounce back?
I think Carmel's going to bounce back. I think last week was definitely a wake-up call. And this is a young team. I mean, I think that when you are riding high, and we kind of said, this was going to be a game to test the fact that you were always the underdog the past few weeks, and now you're on the top tier, and it felt like they thought they might coast in this game, and they clearly got caught, kind of not looking at Suffern as being a same level opponent, and they got punked. And I think that this game is definitely going to be a Carmel team that has woken up, that I feel like they're not going to take this for granted, and I think they're going to bounce back in a big way and have a big win here.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I'm going with Carmel. I think it's going to be a nose to the grindstone type of game. I think they'll be motivated. I think they'll be focused. And I think you're going to see some of these young players bounce back. And I think it starts up front. I think Carmel is going to win the trenches, and I think Carmel is going to win the game. Let's go to North Rockland 1-1 at Fox Lane, who just played tonight, but they're going to play again on Monday, who's 0-3. I'll start it off, Mars. I'm going to go with North Rockland. North Rockland was on a pause. They missed a week. I really liked the way North Rockland was playing before the pause went on. I know they had tough loss week 1. They had a real grind-out overtime win against RCK. The defense has a lot of young guys on the field, and they have stepped up. But I do love the way Rodriguez is playing. I felt that Fox Lane kind of let go of the rope a little bit this week. Now, the first time they got blown out by Carmel, they bounced back against East Fishkill, played really hard. I do think Fox Lane will play much harder than they did tonight. But I don't think it's going to be enough. I think North Rockland is going to win. They just have a little too much offensively for Fox Lane to match.
Yeah, I'm going to say the same thing. I think North Rockland's defense was playing very well even before their pause, and I think that this is going to be kind of a game where they have a week of practice to kind of reevaluate and kind of rebound. I think that they're going to have a lot of energy, come out with a lot of aggressiveness. I'm going to pick North Rockland.
Last one, John Jay's Fishkill 2-0 at Suffern, the game of the week. Does Suffern continue it, or does John Jay's Fishkill go to 3-0?
John Jay's Fishkill is a powerful program, yes. And they've always been a top tier every single year, and they have proven that they have good coaching. It's always something in their water that gets their players to be as big as they are. Their offensive line has been pushing dudes around this whole time, and now you have playmakers. The problem is that you don't know if one of the most important playmakers is going to be on the field. When you look at Suffern, you have similar concept. You have playmakers on the field. Clever Lubin is a force on the offensive side and especially on defense. And this offensive line, very similar to John Jay's Fishkill, can move people. So I'm going to pick Suffern on this one. I think Suffern is definitely has proven to now be a team that is a force to be reckoned with. With the Carmel victory, it really opened the door to what they can possibly do. Yeah. And I think that in some cases they kind of were drifting away from what they were really best at. And when they played against Carmel, they kind of said, you know what, we're going to kind of squeeze everything back in and we're just going to play some power football on you.
Well, in the beginning, they were missing some guys against Arlington. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't just missing the guys that bothered me. They had bad penalties.
Yep.
Right? They weren't efficient defensively. They missed tackles. You saw signs against Scarsdale, right? And then you really saw the real Suffern, or you think the real Suffern against Carmel. So my question is, which Suffern team are we going to see?
Yeah.
The one closer to Arlington or the one closer to Carmel?
Yeah.
That's the question on that side. On East Fishkill, you know you're going to have a good coach team. You know you're going to have a tough defensive team. The question is, did these guys practice enough? Right? Who's going to play in this game due to the COVID issue? Right? So that's the big problem with John Jay's Fishkill. I am going to go with Suffern. I do think this is the Suffern that you saw against Carmel is the more real Suffern. I think this is a team that me and you both really liked preseason. I think we saw more of it, and I think Suffern is going to win another big program win. They could beat Carmel and East Fishkill back-to-back weeks. That would be huge for Suffern, and I do think it's going to happen. All right, everyone, that was our show. I appreciate everyone tuning in. I hope you guys have a safe and sports-filled week and weekend, and we'll see you all very soon.